Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk to you about Vedic astrology, its impact on the world, how it interacts and configures with your life. And I've been a Vedic astrologer of some 30 plus years practice. And I'm going to talk about the last eclipse, the election, and other things that are happening around the world. So, first of all, if you'd like to get a reading from me, you can contact me at 508-525-0001, or you can, I'll repeat that, 508-525-0001. And so that's three zeros and a one. The transcription isn't working that well at the bottom. So it does this every week. I don't know why. And or else you can email me and that you can text me at that message too, at that phone number too, or look me up on WhatsApp. The other way to contact me is through Gary Gomes, g@gmail.com. Again, that's Gary Gomes, G at G, Gary Gomes, g@gmail.com. Okay. So, yeah, it's been a fascinating week and I like to go over it. Also, please subscribe, like, and comment if you wish. I won't be talking about other astrological systems this week because I have a lot to cover with the current election cycle and also with events happening all over the world. So I'm going to get right to that almost immediately. So let's go to that. Let's go to the astrology map. Let me see now. All right. So the map is up, and as we're looking at, what I did was, let me see now. All right. So what I did was I looked at the eclipse map for this past Wednesday, and so we had Jupiter in the first house, Mars in the second, so that can indicate some conflicts um, happening around. And we did have in the fifth house this Moon, K2, Mercury, Sun conjunction, and Venus in the sixth house. So that's the first Lord in the sixth house. So that means a lot of the eclipse is going to focus around conflict about what's fair, what's just, what's economically viable. So to many people, those things are the same thing. To some people, to many people, they are not. And let me explain the difference. So um, I'm not an expert on equity, so don't. But I have been on the periphery of that entire concept for roughly, oh God, I hate to say it, roughly 50 years. So um, it's something I know just a little bit about. I would not presume to call myself an expert, but there's so we get into the entire concept of equality, of opportunity, and then because our opportunity has not always been equal, there have to be adjustments for equity to make opportunity more equal or more equivalent. Okay. And it actually has very little to do with people all achieving the same outcome. It's the opportunity to achieve the same outcome, which is different. So if I do something to make the opportunities equitable, I'm not automatically guaranteeing that everyone is going to achieve the same outcome. I can't fix that quite exactly. Theoretically, it should happen. In actuality, it doesn't always happen. And in order to make things completely equitable, we would have to start off from essentially what I would call a mass redistribution of income and starting at and also trying to adjust and make every area in the country and the world of the same economic stance, of the same educational status, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the ultimate definition, if I can be so bold. But this is about the fight over that. So essentially, what we're talking about is adjustments for equity. We're not talking about true equity. We're talking about adjustments for equity. Okay. Um, and this chart is a fighting chart. So there's no question in my mind that with this particular combination, the sun and moon both being in Virgo, people will be extraordinarily critical of the government and the government's response. Mercury is exalted in the sign, but is stuck squarely between the sun and the moon. What does that mean in plain English? Well, a lot of people are trying to make out how they feel about either side. They're trying to also determine how they feel about justice and whether or not justice is being met. So that's why uh, the theme of the January 6th election is popping up, or I'm sorry, not the January 6th election, the January 6th riot is popping up so often um, in the campaign. So it's I noticed that um, in the presidential and vice presidential debates, the part where the Democrats really seemed to shine was on the ongoing dispute about January 6th, and they've got their um, so without indicating which side I'm on, they got their talking points all in a row. You saw over the past week that there was a refiling of the case against former President Trump this past week, which is in keeping with the eclipse. So it's critical. It's a fight about justice, but it's also an economic fight because you can hear on the Republican side the economy being brought into it. You can also hear um, fairness for people. born in this country versus fairness for people born outside of the country and entering um, under less than normal circumstances. And I think uh, one of the things, so why I'm hesitating so much is I'm trying not to use loaded words, okay? But I think one of the things about this Jupiter and Taurus combination is I think the economic issue just from my judgment, outweighs the political issue because the political issue is it's about stability, it's about security. The thing that's a little bit interesting about this chart is Saturn retrograde does indicate a movement backwards to a previous position. Okay. So Saturn's moving backwards. Jupiter will be moving backwards within a couple of days. Okay. By the 9th, by October 9th, Jupiter will be retrograde. So you'll have the two most significant planets other than Rahu and Ketu moving backwards in the chart. Okay, so Jupiter moving backwards often indicates unorthodox solutions, um, a rejection of accepted wisdom or accepted narrative. And Saturn moving backwards, although it's strong, uh, does indicate the desire for a strong hand is looking backwards to the past. Based upon those factors and those factors alone, I would give Trump the edge in this battle. Okay. So I'm going to go on record. I think Trump's going to win. Okay. If I look at the US chart, so let me look at the US chart. Now, again, this is one of the more, I'm going to give myself an escape hatch and say this is one of the more variable elections I've seen in my lifetime. So even um, when um, Secretary Clinton, even in the Secretary Clinton and Trump election, the astrological community, I think overall, just looked and said, "Well, it's clear that Clinton's going to win." So 2/3 of astrologers were wrong about that particular election. I'm not saying I'm right about this particular one, but that election you could understand it because the polls were very strongly in favor of Mrs. Clinton. Right now we're in a Rahu Mercury subperiod, Rahu Mercury moon that does indicate a change in leadership. Now, obviously, there's going to be a change in leadership if Harris is elected because she's not the same person Joe Biden is. But I think this reflects a change. Now, again, her sub-periods, we're looking at her sub-periods. She'll be in a moon sub-period when the election is being run. Trump will be in a Venus sub-period when the election is being run. So that moon favors her a little bit more, but it's also weakened by, I think it's weakened, some people would disagree with me by the fact that it's disposited by a debilitated Mars. Its ruler is a debilitated Mars. And again, there is a factor. So Barack Obama got elected during a debilitated Jupiter Mahadasha, but it was essentially the end of his Jupiter Mahadasha. So essentially, and Obama had an exalted moon. Kamala Harris's moon is in Aries, which is closely exalted. Donald Trump's is in Scorpio, which is a debilitated placement. But again, like I said, as I said a few weeks ago, the Venus in Trump's Dasamsha chart is stronger than the moon is in Kam in Kamala's Dasamsha chart. So I'm just it's really down to the wire. So again, like I said, this is one of those things that we'll just have to wait and see how it makes its way around. If we're looking at the wider world, and I'll pull up the chart. So this is the United States chart. So we're in a Rahu Mercury moon period, uh, December 18th. It'll be a Rahu Mercury Mars subperiod. Mars will be debilitated when the election is actually held. That's good for neither Kamala or Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, to be honest. It'll be in Trump's 12th house, although Mars is a better planet for Trump than it is for Harris. Um, so again, like I said, these are like slight edges. Um, and I think one of the things that I'm looking at with this chart is I'm literally astonished. No, maybe I shouldn't be astonished, but literally astonished by how much of this election has been dominated by um, not so much lies as by conscious manipulation of speech. I mean, this isn't even um, so. I mean, a lot of the talking points that both parties are using could easily be looking up by any reasonable person and seen they were taken out of context or seen that actions were taken out of context. It's not, but nobody seems curious about that at all. I'm usually curious to find out what the bottom line is. So I think so let's get just illustrate a quick point. When in the vice presidential debate, there was a point at which um, Vance asked about the abortion. Uh, it asked Walz straight ahead about the abortion issue or the abortion law in the state of Minnesota. And if you look carefully at the response, Walz didn't answer him. Walz flat out didn't answer him. And he said it was debunked. And it may have been debunked elsewhere, but it wasn't debunked in the first presidential um, debate and the only presidential debate. It was just asserted by the announcer. So I think so. Again, Trump overspoke. He wasn't specific in terms of what he meant. Vance was very specific. So I spoke last week, and I think Vance definitely won the debate. Although division is certainly division, and in certain parts he fumbled, but I was actually surprised at how well uh, Walls actually did in the debate. I have to give him credit. But I, I think that's just a sample of the kinds of things that are happening in this election. It's more of a propaganda war than I've seen in my entire lifetime. That's just one example. I can take examples from the other side, certainly, and illustrate those, so I'm not picking on the Harris side necessarily, although that was the example I used. But I was just sitting there and saying, well, they, well, they certainly didn't answer that question. And so if we're looking at that, that's that Mars aspect on K2 Mercury. So K2 and Mercury, essentially you make up stories out of whole cloth. You make things up as you're going along. Mars aspecting Mercury is uh, a lying to win combination. Okay. So um, so I I just thought it's just fascinating to watch these things. Some of you may disagree with me and say that Walls, actually did answer that question. If you do so, please indicate to me in the comments below. And you're welcome to dispute me. That's fine. Um, but this isn't a political broadcast. It's about astrology. And I think so. I'm not trying to take sides in this particular issue, but that combination, it makes it easy. That Jupiter aspecting Mercury and K2 makes it easy for things to be made up on the spot. The Jupiter Sun combination, and again, we do have this interesting contrast of the hurricane where we have different reports coming out about the government's involvement with the hurricane. So we're getting some reports coming out saying, "Oh no, the government was down there," and we're getting other reports from people who were down there saying, "No, the government uh, has not yet been down here." So it's really, like I said, it's really who you believe, at this particular point in time. And I don't think anybody's position is going to radically shift. And maybe like a 1 or 2% shift, and that may be enough um, to determine. As a matter of fact, it looks like it is enough to determine this particular election. But but based upon a few factors, and like I said, mostly astrological. But again, to my mind, it's still very, very close. Um, and I think it'll be an interesting few weeks. Um, I don't think we've had our October surprise yet, by the way. Okay, so just to let you know. So I'm going to go to the now chart right now. So the Jack Smith allegations are 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 a reframing of the charges, a restatement of the charges. The evidence is virtually identical. The evidence is nothing new. Uh, it's not really. Um, I actually read through a large part of the report, and the evidence is new. It's really how he's framing uh, the allegations against Trump. And two of the allegations were thrown out by the Supreme Court already. So it'll be interesting to see how whether or not the reframing is going to convince um, anybody or realign. It'll probably just reinforce the stances of both sides. So I don't think it's going to change anything. I I think it'll act to stir the memories of people who were convinced that this was an insurrection, and it'll reaffirm the suspicions of those that this was um, an election. This was a political trial as opposed to a trial connected with the enforcement of the law. Okay, so I'm just restating the two biggest positions. So I don't think it'll really shift anybody's thought radically. Uh, if it was anything uh, where Walls had an advantage on Vance, it was it was essentially the statement in which Vance said uh, that he would have um, allowed the alternate electors or allow the alternate electors to be heard or to be sponsored. And I don't think that did him any favors, but I don't think it wrecked him either. The other thing is, if you look at the chart, so let's look at the broader world overall as opposed to United States politics, because I know United States politics, you're probably sick of this by now. Um, if we look at the rest of the world, we have a Sagittarius rising at the time I'm doing this particular broadcast. Saturn's in the third house retrograde. So people are trying to back off, trying to recapture what is lost. There have been elections which have shown distinctively um, anti-immigration stance in Europe. And that seems to be an increasingly popular notion. Saturn is aspecting one through its reverse, through its retrograde. Saturn's aspecting Venus and the moon. This is the K-Rao technique. And Saturn is aspecting one, two, three. Yeah, that's about it. Saturn's aspecting Cancer, so that's about the only change we would have. So Saturn is aspecting the moon. Um, and overall, from this chart, this shows both an increasing willingness to liberalize and also an increasing resistance to that as the year goes on. And I think it'll reach kind of a breaking point. I would say around April of next year. That's when Saturn and Rahu are conjunct. So I've already discussed that at great length. Um, One of my colleagues is very worried about, excuse me, about the 23-degree Jupiter, uh, and she's tracked. This is Joni Petrie has tracked it and says that's when wars break out. And I haven't done the research she's done, I'll be honest, but I don't necessarily think that one planet combination will necessarily trigger a war unless other factors are supporting it. I could be wrong about that, but just, that's just a little bit of skepticism on my part. She's done research, she would know. But that really won't happen until around um, because Jupiter is going retrograde. It's already happened once. You already had the 23-degree transit of Jupiter earlier this year, and so that I believe that escalated the war, but it didn't cause a new war to break out. But come, I believe it was February or March, we'll see that 23-degree come again. So that would be the time that I would look out for increased conflict or increased um, increased potential for um, serious warfare. So I'm not disagreeing with Joni. I'm just saying I think I think there must be other factors involved other than that. That's a dangerous factor, but no one factor causes factors an event to occur. Mercury right now is at 22 degrees, 27 minutes. Virgo is with K2 and Sun, so not very different from the eclipse. Venus and Moon are together, which is a nice combination. So people tend to get along a little bit better when Venus and Moon are together. But that Saturn aspect makes it a little bit depressing or down. So people want to rest a little bit today. That's fine. And maybe they'll want to rest over the next week. But again, as I said, expect more water-related catastrophes and more fire-related catastrophes because of the Sun K2 conjunction and also Rahu and Pisces. So Rahu and Pisces gives a lot of water. Mars aspecting Virgo and K2 is responsible. K2 actually has Rahu is connected with air. The element that K2 is connected with are fire and water. Okay, so I think one of the things uh, that you want to look at is increased fires around the world, increased outages. We have had some internet outages over the past few weeks. I've experienced some, and some people around the world, definitely in North Carolina and South Carolina, I'm sorry, North Carolina and Georgia, they're experiencing them. Also, I would expect to see more governments, especially as that sun moves into Libra. I would expect to see more governments engaged in more censorship, especially as the elections in other countries come up. And there are more laws coming into effect around the world encouraging censorship. And it's important for me to just share this bit of information for you. Although there are consequences if a person yells, says something that's untrue, so they can be sued in court, they can be, they can cause damage, etc., etc. It's not against the law. There is nothing in the First Amendment that says so. The First Amendment is largely um, misunderstood in that it says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or assembly, etc., etc. So I think that so does that mean that the president can do something? Does that mean that the heads of states in other countries can do something? Well, those rights aren't quite as clearly articulated as they are in the United States. They're inferred because there's a free press, and there have been laws passed in various parts of the world to prohibit hate speech. But speech is speech. It's an absolute. Okay. So I'm not in favor of hate speech. Don't get the wrong idea. I just think constitutionally you would have trouble um, getting it to stick uh, if push came to shove. And even though the Supreme Court has said that privately owned businesses can limit their speech, so essentially the grounds for Google or YouTube limiting hate speech is the fact that is the fact that they're privately owned businesses. Not that the government has the right to censor the press or to censor you as an individual. If you join uh, a group like Google or X or Twitter, as it used to be known, there are rules that govern that behavior. So you have to abide by those particular rules. But government cannot make a law that essentially outlaws it. That would have more trouble. So at least we go by a strict reading of the Constitution, by a very strict reading of the Constitution. Now, I'm not a constitutional scholar, so that legal advice is worth next to nothing, but that's how I interpret it. So if we have this combination, I think over the next month or so, you'll see essentially government trying to, almost around the world, trying to censor more. But the problem with that is government will be very weak during this particular phase. So we'll have a debilitated sun moving into Libra aspected by Saturn. So that Saturn aspect will encourage um, more efforts to limit speech or limit discourse. It will have a tough time holding through though. You'll also see, I think, some problems with the markets because Libra is the sign that rules markets. So, um, anecdotally, uh, who I consult with and people who I do readings for are telling me they're having a very tough time of it economically. And I'm hearing from, so I, so I'm not quite convinced that the economy is slipping upward. I hope it is. I, I, I really hate recessions. I hate what they do to a society. I actually started my entry into the workforce during a recession. And it was really painful to get a job. Everybody was desperate to get work. So uh, I don't, you know, I don't want to see that happen. But again, like I said, uh, the indicators a little bit astrologically, the indicators are a little bit are more in favor of a recession than opposed to it. So so just watch this. If I'm wrong, I'll happily be wrong. I'll be very happy about that. There, however, having been in that sector of government for about 34 years of my life, I can tell you most assuredly there are always opportunities for work. It's not, it just takes more effort to find it. But maybe not on the terms you want. Inflation will pick up again by the end of the week. Again, and if we're talking about war breaking out between Iran and the United States, I'm saying Mars and Mercury. Mars Mercury conjunction is almost right on the money. Yeah, so expect a spate of lies over the next few days. I mean, like a real flood of lies over the next few days. But um, I, given the current policies, given the current situations the United States has set for itself, um, I'm not sure we can avoid that. Um, and that'll be just one more thing. Certainly, an escalation has started. This has um, overtones of the Israeli conflict has overtones of Vietnam, not only in terms of the war protests, but in terms of the uh, gradually growing troop presence in Israel. As I said, there's a lot of similarity between this chart and the late 60s chart, only it's in a much more condensed period of time. So hopefully, um, people will exercise judgment and not go to war. Hopefully, they won't be stupid and they'll try to rein back things. To give credit where credit is due, uh, I know that the current administration is trying to scale back um, or trying to work towards um, a ceasefire, but the increased troop presence in the United States doesn't help, in all honesty. And so I'm just a bit worried about that. I mean, is it avoidable? Yeah, definitely. Here we have discrimination, which Mercury represents. And if we can just get past this particular period where Mercury is um, being malefically influenced by Mars, yeah, here we can get through this next week without major shots being fired, then we're in good shape. And there is always a choice in astrology. Okay, so I don't want you. I don't believe in the idea that astrology doesn't give choices to people. It certainly does. Um, so, but that's like I said, that Saturn going backwards does indicate increasing anti-war opposition, increasing potential uh, of fuels being going up in price over the next few weeks, and increasingly high potential for not really not an economic collapse, but an economic adjustment before November 5th. So this will be fascinating. The other thing that I'm watching carefully is Japan. I'm watching India carefully because there is some disruption in that part of the world, and we'll get to that when we look at the world map. Okay. So in terms of the world overall, everybody's fighting. Okay. First Lord, Jupiter is in the sixth Lord. They're fighting for security. They're fighting for legality. Jupiter disposes to Venus, which is in Libra, which is in its own sign. That's why you've seen so many what I would call moderating influences over the past couple of weeks, especially in court hearings. And Venus, if Venus is weak, at least from my experience as an astrologer, if Venus is weak, justice does not prevail. Okay, it's really as simple as that. It's Jupiter is the ethical standard, but Venus is the fair planet, is the planet which is most responsible for assessing what's reasonable and what's unreasonable. Jupiter can be a little bit dogmatic. That's its major weakness. Venus is more um, measured in its response. Okay, so that's one of the big differences between the two great benefics. So Jupiter is tradition, policy, authority, essentially the way things were always done. Venus is saying, yeah, but is this really fair? Is this really the best way to proceed? So that's the major difference between the two planets. So this, if you're a traditionalist, Jupiter will definitely be the better planet for you. If you're more of a reformer, Venus will definitely be the planet for you. Okay? Or Venus is more capable of reform and adjustment. Jupiter is more capable of wisdom, looking at the long-term goals. And Venus looks and says, again, is this fair? So right now, Venus, by being in its own sign, is a bit stronger. But if you look at the scales over here, Jupiter is stronger by its position in the chart. Um, and Venus is a bit weaker because it's in the 11th house. So basically, when we're assessing strengths of charts, house placement becomes really important. So Jupiter has more strength by being closer to the fourth house. Venus is in its weakest position. It's in one of its weakest positions in terms of its effectiveness. Okay, so let's go to the chart for Aries. Aries has Jupiter in the second house. There's a strong emphasis on money, on financial growth. Mars is in uh, the third house, so this sign is very ambitious right now. Mercury and K2 and Sun are in the sixth house, so Aries is not about lying to get its way. Uh, Venus and Moon are in the seventh house, so that gives relatively pleasant relationships, spouses and partners. Um, and Saturn's in the 11th, which gives some slow but steady financial gain. But again, you may have to go back and redo some work. And Rahu finally is in the 12th house. It's an expensive month and week for Aries. For Jupiter, Jupiter's in Taurus. I mean, for Taurus, Jupiter's in Taurus. That strengthens the eighth and the 11th house. So it'll give some gains, maybe some legacy gains. So money that was owed you will be paid you. Mars is in um, the second house. So this can live to disputes with relationship partners. Sun, K2, and Mercury are in the fifth house. Some disputes with children, or children are acting a little bit unruly. Some problems with luck, with financial luck, because people who owe you money might be a little bit reticent about paying you. Venus is in the sixth house. Um, that does give this sign some ability to change direction and to improve over the next few weeks. For Saturn, Saturn's in the 10th. It makes this sign work very hard. Rahu is in the 11th, so that gives some financial growth to this sign, but it will be passing. For Gemini, Gemini has Mars in the first house, so there has to be some caution about romantic relationships, because this can indicate that the sign is being used a little bit. Cancer's in the second house. The moon is in the fifth house. The Lord is in the fifth house. So again, some financial benefits for this sign. Also some speech benefits. It's good for talking points, good for debating. Um, K2, Mercury, and Sun are in the fourth house. Excuse me. Excuse me. Okay, so back to Gemini. Um, Some disputes at home, some disputes with family members, it looks like. Children will be better treated, maybe helped a little bit more. Also, there's some income gains because of this combination in the fifth house. Saturn is in the ninth house, so it indicates slow but positive growth over the week. Rahu's in the 10th house. It gives some career fame or recognition. Jupiter in the 12th, however, does give financial um, expenses, especially connected with relationship partners. So if we go to Cancer now, Cancer has Venus and Moon in the fourth house. The sign is relatively placid, peaceful, a little bit anxious about the future, but not really bad. There aren't any major conflicts at home, at least not right now, not currently. Uh, Mercury, Sun, and K2 are in the third house, so this sign has a lot of ambition, but it has to watch out for relationship partners, either lying or being deceitful to it. Let's see now. Saturn is in the eighth house. Again, a major restructuring for the sign that won't be over until May of next year sometime. And also a reconfiguration of relationships. So what I mean by that is you'll be considering what new business partnerships to get into and what business partnerships to uh, leave. Rahu's in the ninth house. It does give some temporary gain, some improvement, some financial growth, and Jupiter's in the 11th house. That's good for financial gain, but Mars is in the 12th house, which is not good for the sign. So again, it hurts career and it hurts gains just a little bit. For it is heading towards its own sign where it will be debilitated in about a week and a half. But on the positive, in about a week and a half, Cancer actually, this is actually what's called the Raj Yoga Karaka planet for Cancer, so it'll actually produce some good results, even though um, the significations of Cancer will be a little bit, or the significations of Mars, that is aggression, um, politeness, not politeness, aggression will be accentuated. Mars and Cancer people come off as being a little too pushy or angry. Um, and also communications problems are indicated with that particular sign placement. For a Leo, Leo has Sun and K2 and Mercury in the second house and Venus and Moon in the third house. So it makes this sign seem a bit more charitable. It'll give this sign some financial blessings because Mars is in the 11th house and it's aspecting Mercury. So that's what we would call a Dana Yoga for this particular chart or a wealth producing combination. So you should see some increases in money, although reputation is still not really strong from this combination. Venus and Moon are in the third house. So again, charitable, kindly seeming, at least at this particular point in time. Saturn's in the seventh house, some upset or consternation to wife or relationship partner, some fear. And also, I think Saturn in the seventh is not necessarily a bad combination, but relationship partners will seem to be difficult to deal with, or allies will seem to be difficult to deal with. Rahu's in the eighth house. Again, this sign does have to watch out for conspiracies, underhanded dealings, especially from allies, to be honest. Um, Jupiter's in the 10th house of career. Overall, that's a good indicator for this particular sign. Jupiter rules the fifth house of past life credit and or past credit, and it's in the 10th house, so that should indicate some career growth. And Mars, as we said, does indicate some financial growth. For Virgo, Virgo has Mercury, K2, and I'm going to stop the share and just make sure that this is recording. My apologies if it hasn't been. Okay. For Virgo, Virgo has K2, Mercury, and Sun in the first house. That's actually a good combination. This acts as a yoga karaka planet for both uh, Gemini and Virgo rising. This is a Raj yoga um, for Virgo, so it should produce some growth and some increased intelligence. The only problem is for another 12 days or so, Sun is in the sign, so that accentuates expenses and debts over the next 2 weeks or so. But again, if we look at it the right way, it can introduce some spiritual activity, some spiritual sadhana, and so that's a constructive way to use this particular time. Venus is in the second house along with the moon. That's another wealth producing combination because the moon and Venus are both wealth producing planets for this particular rising sign. So that's good, at least for the next week. Saturn is in the sixth house, and that indicates the ability to improve oneself or to gain through hard work or effort. Rahu is in the seventh house. Not a particularly good combination for relationships or starting relationships. So again, I would tend to stay away from folks in terms of relationship life. Um, or if you get involved, just don't get too serious too quickly. Um, Jupiter's in the ninth house, so it'll give opportunities for spiritual growth and spiritual advancement and increased luck and learning. Mars is in the 10th house, more ability to improve in career life. And that's about it for this particular sign. For Libra, we have Venus and Moon in the first house. So that's a lot of emphasis on career and career growth. So that's a positive for Libra rising. Uh, we have Saturn in the fifth house, another positive planet for Libra rising, although it does give slow growth and slow acquisition of knowledge. But you'll find yourself going over things you thought you learned and relearning them, which is okay. It's essentially what I would call a practice period for the next few months. So the way you practice a musical instrument or practice your lines, that's what this is. That's what this is. It's a review period. Rahu is in the sixth house. If Rahu is in the sixth, that indicates the ability to overcome enemies, although enemies may be tough, and there are some ambitions which can't be fulfilled without a lot of effort. Mercury is in the 12th house in this chart. It's in its more favored sign, and uh, along with K2. So again, that indicates increased luck, but the person will have to spend some money. Jupiter's in the eighth house. That's actually not bad for Libra rising because this is the third and sixth house lord in the eighth house. That's what's called a repeat yoga, so it cancels. So you have two Dustana or wasting away houses in a third wasting away house. it produces a positive combination. So there can be unexpected money coming from different sources. Uh, Mars in the ninth house, a lot of luck connected with property and also with a relationship partner. So this is not a bad week for Libra. Um, it shifts about 2 weeks from now when Venus goes into Scorpio, but to be honest with you, for some Libras, that'll still be good. Because Venus is going into a house of wealth for Libra rising. For Scorpio, Jupiter's in the seventh house in this chart. Mars is in the eighth house. You have to watch out for relationship partners. You have to watch out for allies throwing you under the bus. It is a difficult time for health-related issues. Uh, Joe Biden has this combination in his chart. Joe Biden's a Scorpio rising, excuse me. So there can be some health issues for Joe Biden over the next few weeks. And let's see now. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the next few months, next couple of months. And we have Saturn in the fourth house. Again, it gives some conflicts or some sadness at home. Rahu is in the fifth house. That's good for financial luck of this sign, although there can be some deviousness connected with the financial gains. Let's see now. Sun, Mercury, Ketu are in the 11th house. So some gains, but also some risk of losses, because the 12th Lord, I'm sorry, because this Ketu's in the same sign with uh, the 8th Lord, and that gives some problems with holding on to money. And let's see now. But overall, overall, not, I would say not good for status, not good for reputation. Okay. Venus and Moon are in the 11th house. That gives some financial boost to this sign because that's actually Venus likes the 12th house. You have two relative benefics there, although the Moon isn't really quite as strong as it should be, but it's still favorable. But again, more expenses, definitely. For Sagittarius, Sagittarius has Jupiter in the fifth house. This is a good combination for overcoming enemies or overcoming personal problems. I need to readjust for a second, folks. And Saturn is in the third house, some additional courage for the planet, but again, some additional hardships to show that courage for the sign rather not the planet. Rahu is in the fourth house. This indicates some domestic dispute or disruption. We've already spoken about Jupiter in the sixth house. Mars is in the seventh house. That gives open enemies, especially in conflicts. K2 is with Mercury and Sun, so this will indicate there may be some misrepresentation of career or something like that. And also, there's a strong desire for recognition. And so, again, it's one of those things where it's easy to lie with this combination in order to make yourself look better, but it's going to be fruitless, and a lot of it will be exposed relatively quickly. Venus and Moon are in the 11th house. That's actually a good placement for the sign. It does indicate at least some partial economic recovery. For Capricorn, Capricorn has no planets in the first. The first lord is in the second house, so that should give some financial gains. although slow. And again, there'll be a feeling like you're backtracking a little bit because of the retrograde Saturn. Rahu's in the third house. That's not a bad placement. Rahu is good for overcoming enemies, fulfilling desires. Jupiter is in the fifth house, some financial gains, especially from um, from past investments. Mars is in the sixth house, so you have to fight to take what's yours. You'll have to argue with people to take what's yours rightfully. Mercury is in the ninth house with Sun and Ketu. That can indicate some disputes with bosses, although bosses will be generally smart and forgiving, but again, some disputes or misunderstandings. Venus and Moon are in the 10th house. That's actually good for career progress, for career growth. For Aquarius, Aquarius still has that rulership combination of Saturn in the first house, but it'll be rulership from the past. It'll be a memory of rulership or just a temporary status. Rahu is in the second house. That's good for financial growth, good for financial improvement, and especially with Jupiter in the fourth. Mars is in the fifth house, some potential gain through work or career based upon past efforts and also based upon past aggression. Excuse me. Mercury is in 1, 2, 3, 4. It's in the eighth house along with K2 and Sun. That indicates research and also interest in metaphysical incidents or also in what I would call coincidences. So a lot of this chart has to be really careful traveling. Just be careful, just be extraordinarily careful traveling over the next week or so. Okay, because this is kind of an accident-prone combination for every sign. For we have Venus in the ninth house along with the moon. So that's a good combination for effort to learn new things. And that's about it for Aquarius. For Pisces, Pisces has Rahu in the first house. So there's this definite desire for something more, desire for something additional in life. Jupiter's in the third house. Uh, it makes this sign even more ambitious. Mars is in the fourth house. Some potential for domestic disputes, and relationship partners may be not telling you the entire truth. Venus and Moon in the eighth house does indicate some additional financial gains through relationship partners and maybe through inheritances or money that's owed. And Saturn's in the 12th house. So again, heavy expenditure patterns show up in the chart. There's been nothing I've seen in this chart to indicate that inflation has essentially it's slowed. There's no question about that, but there's no return to previous prices. Uh, and I think that that's true of all signs. Like every single sign is spending more than it has previously. So that's kind of an issue. Let's see now. So let's go to the time and space chart. Oops, it isn't working properly. There we go. Okay, so we have it. All right. All right. So let me change this back. Let me get out of this because I'm like making a lot of progress here. There we go. That's what we want to see. Excellent. Okay, so there's a moon line, a moon and Venus line running through, um, and first of all, let me look at the Sun Mercury line over here, uh, near Alaska. So the Sun Mercury line can indicate there can be some problems in terms of mineral rights in Alaska, um, and also maybe even some political scandals up there. Uh, there's a Venus moon line close to the Hawaiian Islands. Um, Possible rainfall, possible intense rainfall in Hawaii, and also, but more likely in Western Canada. There's a Saturn line running through California, Washington State, and Oregon, and also through Nevada. And I think the Saturn line indicates some potential for air disasters and also for um, not necessarily earthquakes, but for some uh, bad weather or some misery or some economic problems. Um, for Let me move this down here. All right. For There's a Jupiter line running up through Mexico. So again, this thing about border security becomes an issue. It becomes an issue all the way up through some panic, especially through Oklahoma and into Canada. Whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. All right, and we have we have a we have a Sun and Mercury line also running through um, Louisiana, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and down through Iowa, down into um, oh God, down into Louisiana, and also throughout close to the Great Lakes region, and I believe that's Mississippi. So that part of the world indicates some government scandals or cover-ups in this region right here. The Jupiter line indicates it will be exposed in um, throughout Michigan and Minnesota and Iowa. And keep in mind, these are very general indicators. Some corruption in Mexico shows up, and that shows up all the way down to the southern tip of Mexico and into Nicaragua, or close to Nicaragua and Guatemala. And let's see now. And we have a Jupiter line running up through Canada. So that should indicate some more traditional values, or some more traditional wisdom occurring in Canada. Um, we have a Moon Venus line running off the coast of the eastern seaboard of the United States, so close to Nova Scotia. So again, some potential for flooding. And there's a Mars line, so we've already seen the destruction that Helene caused. So that's why the Mars line is down there. Cuba, and I would say Panama also are experiencing some destructive tendencies right now, Virgin Islands. And as we go over here, we have a Moon Venus line running through Bolivia, Argentina, Brazil, uh, Venezuela, and close to um, Guyana. So I think that overall there should be some potential for flooding and also some potential for trade disputes in those particular parts of the world. So this line running all the way down here, all the way down to Argentina. For Azores and Madeiras, um, you know, there's a Jupiter line running through those locations and also a Saturn line, so that can indicate increasing economic pressure on those locations. That's true of Iceland as well. And we have a bunch of lines running through England and Ireland and Spain. And wow, so we have a Moon Venus line, so there can be some uh, difficult rainfall, also some commercial ills running through England, Spain, and England, France, uh, and down towards Italy. And also the Sun Mercury line running through Ireland indicates some disruption financially, but also some politicians caught not lies. This is true of Portugal as well. And I would say, um, I would say, um, Morocco uh, down to the Ivory Coast and all the way through, and definitely some political scandal in France. That's not going to go away. Some revelations about French um, government definitely coming up this way, along with the Moon and Venus lines, causing some popular revolt. And this extends into Belgium and Germany and also Italy and also into Libya, down into Sudan, down into southeastern Africa. So this is going to be kind of a difficult time for those countries. For Norway, Sweden, and Finland, we have a Jupiter line running through. So those countries are going to be more concerned with economic security and economic status than almost anything else. Uh, Iran has a line running through it. So there's some hope that Iran won't um, overreact when there's retaliation foisted against it. There's some hope or some idea that, but the Saturn line down here doesn't look very thrilling, to be honest with you. So if any part of the country gets hit hard by retaliation, it'll be uh, the southeastern part. And if we look at Israel and Turkey, so Israel has basically no lines passing through it, although it is stuck between Jupiter and Venus, who aren't friendly with each other. So there is this dispute over whether or not Israel's doing something which is within its rights or not. Um, there's a Saturn line. Let's look at the Ukraine. There's a Jupiter line running through the Ukraine and also through these republics down here. And if I were to join these all together, it looks to me like there's some kind of consensus about trying to calm down the war, although the Russians don't seem eager to calm down right now because of the Mars line right there. There's a Mars Saturn line running through um, Iran and Russia. So I'm not saying those countries will be in dispute, but there'll certainly be, I would say, some diplomatic action between those two countries. There is a very dangerous Rahu line passing through Bhutan into India, and it looks like a Mars line right next to it, and a Mercury line right next to that. So there is some government deceit going on between China and India, and to me, it looks like they're getting ready to engage in some kind of a fight, although there have been warning signs of that before, and nothing's ever come of it. So let's hope that's true. We have a Moon Venus line running through southeast China, um, parts of Mongolia, and into Russia, eastern Russia. So that tends to indicate heavy rainfalls. It also goes through New Guinea and Western Australia. I'm sorry, Borneo and Western Australia. My apologies. Um, and also Indonesia. So yeah, so we can expect some heavy rainfall, maybe some economic fluctuation in the markets over the next couple of weeks. China has been trying to rebuild its economy. I mean, it's been, um, I'm just trying to think of a good way to put it. Uh, it's been tough for them to kickstart the economy for a variety of reasons. But this is one of the more interesting phenomena that we've seen. And let's see now, we also have going through Japan, which is right over there. There's a descending Saturn line, so Japan is anxious and worried, and I can't say as I blame them. There has been a lot of activity in the Far East uh, in terms of finances, and by the way, I think you're going to see some government corruption uncovered in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. Okay. And finally, one, two, three, four, five. So we were talking about the rain, and I think that's about it. Okay. Oh, I forgot New Zealand. My apologies. New Zealand has a Rahu line going through it. So some government disruption or government scandal happening in New Zealand. So that's it for this week. Again, I'm happy to be here, happy to be doing this for you guys every week. Again, I do hope to do it more frequently and in shorter broadcasts throughout the week, especially as the election comes closer. Um, and again, keep something in mind. I have never seen such of a toss the football or uncertain outcome. So if you look at one source, um, individuals will say clearly one candidate has the advantage, clearly another candidate has the advantage. I'm not seeing that. I'm not really seeing that almost anywhere that I'm looking. Okay, so there may be some things, some a couple of days where one individual seems to be riding high and doing well, and after you get away from those couple of days, um, it, that advantage is gone and shifts to the other candidate. So this has been fascinating, uh, but it's also, excuse my voice, It's also reflective of what's in the sky right now. The sky is very unstable or unsettled. It'll start to stabilize and you'll see a distinct direction taking place, I would say within about a week and a half. But I've gone out on a limb today and said who I think will win, but that's as of now. And I'll leave myself an escape hatch because things could change. Like literally, I hear my fingers click like that. Okay. So until then, take care of yourselves. I love you all. Thank you so much for watching. If I don't mean to offend by any statements I've made, if I did offend, that's not my nature, but I have to call things as I interpret them. So, you know, that's not, you know, I can't be, I try to please everybody, but sometimes I can't please everybody. Okay. So this is one of those times, I think. And I don't think anything I said was really, really harsh, but it was just the way I saw it. I love you all. I hope you have a fantastic week. Take care of whatever advantage you can see. The eclipse actually does open a lot of doors for people. So this will give you a chance to explore what you want to do uh, with some freedom. Okay. So keep that in mind. It's really going to be an extraordinary couple of months. So if you see some opportunities, run and grab them. Okay. All right, guys. You take care of yourselves and namaste. Thank you for watching. And again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring a bell for notifications. It's a small step for you, but it's a large step for me. Okay. Thanks, folks.